Good morning all, and welcome to our RailTech webinar, What to Do with All That Data. In the rail industry, just like in all industries, the amount of available data has increased immensely over the last few years. With more data comes more opportunities and also responsibilities. What kind of data is being measured today? What can be done to maximize the potential value extracted from this data? How is it being shared between relevant parties? What are some of the difficulties in data sharing? To discuss these topics today, we have two wonderful guest speakers joining us. Richard Lenthall is new business manager at voestalpine Signaling and is joining us online. Hello, Richard.
Good morning, everybody.
And Juliette van Driel is product manager for wayside train monitoring systems and real-time asset monitoring for the Dutch railway infrastructure manager ProRail. Thank you for joining us in the studio. Thank you both so much for being here. My name is Emma Daly, and I'm a journalist with RailTech.com and RailTech Belgium, and your host for today. My colleague Esther Geerts is also a journalist with RailTech.com. Hello, Esther.
Yes, good morning, everybody. I will be keeping an eye on the chat today, so if you have any questions for any of the speakers, please feel free to send them, and I will send them to our guests.
Thank you, Esther. To start us off, I would like both of our guests to tell me a little bit about their jobs. So, Juliette, why don't you start?
Thank you, Emma. Well, I'm a product manager of wayside train monitoring systems and real-time asset monitoring at ProRail. For wayside train monitoring systems, we have hotbox detection and wild, and I'm responsible for the whole chain, which begins at installations in track, and then the chain of getting all the data and information to our different end users. And for real-time asset monitoring, I'm responsible for all kinds of sensors, for switch monitoring, movable bridges, track stability, and then also getting all the data from the sensors into our ProRail monitoring platform, PMP, and getting it to the different end users, like our contractors and our inspectors and system specialists. And a brief answer to your question, like what should we do with all the data? Well, I would say use it, embrace it. All these data, they are our friend.
Wonderful, thank you so much. What about you, Richard?
Yeah, as you said, my role at voestalpine Signaling Siershahn is that I'm the new business manager in the new business team. And what we're doing in that team is talking to customers really about how to get more value from the data that they collect, because we've realized in the last, say, 5-10 years of providing wayside monitoring systems around the world that the needs of the customer have evolved. The purpose of this new team that we've created is to talk to customers about what their needs are, what their issues, challenges are in everyday operations, and help them to get more value from the data that's collected.
Wonderful, thank you. And so I'll start off with the first question for Juliette. Can you tell me a little bit about the kind of data that ProRail measures and how this compares to neighboring countries?
Well, for wayside train monitoring systems, we measure with our wild systems the weight of all trains which run over our network, and with the hotbox detection, temperatures of axle boxes and wheels, and we send these data to the railway undertakings, which can use the data for the maintenance of their rolling stock, and we also use this data to prevent derailments by bad wheels or hot wheels or hot axle boxes. And well, for wayside train monitoring systems, well, compared to other countries like Austria or Switzerland, well, they also have the same kind of systems. Austria also has some more systems. They also have some acoustic systems, which is also very interesting for getting data for maintenance of the rolling stock. And comparing to our nearest neighbor, Germany, they also have wild and hotbox detection, as far as I know, and Belgium is also rolling out a hotbox detection network. And we recently also had some contacts with Luxembourg, which also were rolling out the systems.
And Richard, can you tell me a little bit about the data that voestalpine can measure?
Yeah, certainly. So it's interesting that the acoustic reference has also been mentioned just there. So, in our portfolio of wayside diagnostic and monitoring technologies, we can provide the hot box, hot wheel products. And I think that the industry is broadly familiar with the value that those systems can provide in terms of alarming and stopping trains. So the data there from the systems has historically been quite two-dimensional. So the temperature of the axle or the asset on the train is measured, and if it breaches a certain threshold, we deliver an alarm, and that has historically been the end of the value chain, so to speak. With the advent of the acoustic measurement technologies, we're also now providing our AMS system, which listens to the train as it passes. And as Juliette has intimated, those systems are able to look at the state of the bearing by the noise that it makes and measure that over time for detecting early stage degradation and defects of that particular asset. With Zentrack, our sort of monitoring software, what the customer is able to do is use those two solutions as a hand-in-glove solution. So you've got both the HPD for the last line of defense and alarming the infrastructure operator or maintainer that there is a train on the network that has a dangerously high temperature on one of its trains. And of course, provide the acoustic system data to the train operating company to say, let's try to avoid the alarm. And here's the sort of condition-based maintenance angle. And this particular bearing is showing signs of wear, and we can provide both, and the interface is harmonized. Outside of that, we're also able to supplement it with wheel defect data, which is broadly installed throughout the Netherlands and other countries such as the United Kingdom, Austria, and Poland. So we're looking at now what the customer needs in terms of the next dimension, the next stage of data development, and the portfolio that we provide is looking to match those needs.
Great, thank you. So Juliette, what other entities collect data on the Dutch rail network, and how and with whom is this data shared? So what parties are exchanging data, and can you give some concrete examples of how that brings benefits, essentially?
Okay, well, in the Dutch railway network, we measure a lot. We measure our switches with sensors. We measure our bridges with sensors, but we also have a lot of measuring trains running over a network a few times a year for the quality of track and the geometry of track. So we have quite a lot of data, which we share with our contractors for maintenance, who are responsible to maintain our tracks. And then for our wayside train monitoring systems, we share the data with railway undertakings. They use the data for maintenance of their rolling stock, and in the past they only used the wild data for wheel defects. But since a few years, they also use the data of the hotbox detection also to get an indication if something is wrong with an axle. And then, of course, we also we want to share our data of our wild and hotbox detection data with like owners of rolling stock. But there is a little difficulty, because if we want to give the data to a wagon owner, then the railway undertaking has to give permission, and this can be quite an bureaucratic exercise. And we also share our wild data of the weight of the wagons with companies which load wagons, like the company IMO in Rotterdam, which loads coal and iron ore trains. If the railway undertaking gives permission to share the data with them, we give them their data. And they use this to look into the trains which are coming back empty. sometimes there is what we call a rest load still in the train, which should be empty. And then when there is a rest load, they know we have to take it out, or we can't put in that much in it, for example. And also we can also check for unbalanced loading. But we want to share more than we now are legally able to, because some railway undertakings, they don't want to the data. They don't want the measurements we measure on their trains. They don't want them to be shared.
And Richard, what do you think of the way that data is currently being shared, the state of the ease of data sharing today?
Yeah, I think despite Juliette's description of some of the limitations that she and ProRail are facing today, I actually think the Netherlands is quite far advanced in the way that it approaches this topic. I think that one of the aspects that I hear is that there is actually a willingness to share the data, and I think that is often an understated premise, really, in the data storyline. Simply put, you need people to want to share the data before you can do anything with it, because if they don't want to, then the limitations are clearly there. I think that the Dutch, like in many things in life, are sort of quite advanced in this kind of thing, and they've been quite democratic in the approach. I think there's other countries out there that probably taking their first steps into this, and being a little bit apprehensive about what might happen. I think that sorry, let me complete that. They're being a bit apprehensive about what might happen when they share the data too liberally, and what the sort of inherent risks are in that, from their point of view, is being described by Juliette when she talks about the connection between the wagon owner and the train operating company. Also, an aspect of this is in passenger trains, where new rolling stock that is provided by a company which has its own onboard monitoring leases or provides the trains to a train operating company, and the OEM doesn't necessarily want all of the data shared with third parties because of contractual and warranty obligations. I can understand that. I fully understand the contractual obligations, but they have to be, in my opinion, leveled with the sort of aim for each railway and each infrastructure operator and train operating company, I'm sure, to aim for the best possible safety targets. So one should not be at odds with the other, and we should move forward in harmony. And I think that is what I aim to discuss at the presentation that I'm going to give in Warsaw in November, which is how to standardize, how to contract, how to start talking about a trust environment inside the railway industry, where this can be achieved, data sharing can be achieved to the benefit of all. But certainly, to wrap up this bit, I think that it is for each country. I think it's above the railways, but I think it's for each country to establish its own rules of engagement when we talk about data sharing on the railways.
Thank you. I believe Esther has a question from the audience.
Yeah, there's some questions coming in. There's a question from Bernd George Wagner asking, as an owner of rolling stock, I can enforce the railway undertaking to share data, and it is significant for us as an owner. But what can I do to facilitate that process? Could you say anything about that, Juliette?
Well, to facilitate, I think it's like facilitating the process, like sharing between a railway undertaking and the wagon owner. Well, the wagon owner has, as infrastructure manager at ProRail, we have the data, and it's we send it to the railway undertaking because it's their data, and then getting the data to the wagon owner. Well, there are some issues, and then first, when the railway undertaking is yes, of course, share the data, we all benefit, then it's no problem, because as a railway, as an infrastructure manager, we can send the data directly to the wagon owner, or the railway undertaking can send it to the wagon owner. But and if the railway undertaking is reluctant, we can also send some data to the wagon owner if the wagon owner is also the entity in charge of maintenance. We are allowed to send them the data of the wheel quality, but we are not allowed to give the data of the loading. So that's how shall I put it? That's a balance. That's where we balance in between. Like, what can we legally give, and what is efficient to give.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. There's also another question from Richard, another Richard. As said, all providers of solutions provide a huge amount of solutions to monitor data, and with all that data available, could you give, Juliette, an indication of what type of data is used more, and do you have any priorities in what data is interesting?
Well, in my field, I see that putting sensors and installations in track to monitor and to gather data isn't that difficult. And like new techniques, which there are a lot of new techniques to measure and monitor all kinds of things. I think the real challenge is in using the data, making information of it, then analyzing the data, combining the data with other sources, and then make information of it, so we can, the railway sector can benefit from this, and we can have more effective, efficient maintenance, as well for our tracks and assets, and also rolling stock.
And Richard, do you have anything to add?
Yes. We've covered a couple of topics there. I think that as a system supplier, historically our targets really have been to work with the customer to provide them with the systems that they need to achieve their own particular aims and objectives. And I think that the industry in the past few years has sort of matured from a rather two-dimensional basis, that there was some thresholds, and there was an alarm generated, and that was kind of the end of it, into quite an overwhelming state where there's a lot of data, and how do we use it? Certainly from the voestalpine point of view, we're now moving into the provision of different interfaces for different customers, depending on what their role is inside the railway undertaking, so that they can get information that makes sense to them. And what I mean by that is, if you take the situation on HS1 in the UK right now, we provide a couple of wheel defect detection systems between the Channel Tunnel and London. And when a train that has a kilonewton wheel impact of over a certain threshold, we will automatically provide an alarm to HS1. However, from the same system, using the same data set, the same reading, the same hosting, the same service provision, if there is lower impacts detected by the system that could be of interest to the train operating company, we provide those alerts to companies such as Eurostar, so that they can get to the defects quicker. So it's not just a question of where do I have my systems. It's not a question of what data is gleaned from those systems or the trains that pass. It is very much a question today of how do I present information to the consumer so that they can take the most appropriate course of action for their organization.
Esther, are there any other
Yeah,
questions?
there's some more. Farzad from Panto Health is asking, in terms of the data collection pipeline, are there, and I assume he's asking about the Netherlands, are there any sensors on commercial trains that you know of that collect data besides the specific measurement trains? And are those also connected to the ProRail monitoring platform?
Well, the ProRail monitoring platform is concerned, there's only, in the ProRail monitoring platform is only real-time data of our assets. But we also have other systems which, like our branch broad monitoring system, this system collects data from measuring trains. So, and as ProRail, we hire measuring trains and they collect data from the measuring trains. And also we have trains which measure we also have trains which measure the geometry of the track. And also this is done by measuring trains, and then we get tons of data which we validate and put in the systems which are meant for those. But I'm not aware of other commercial trains measuring our network.
Okay, so that's not okay. And would that be of interest, or would that be more valuable to add that?
Well, then it would be it would be interesting. Like, what is this measuring train going to measure, and what can we do with it? What is its value? Mm-hmm. And as far as pantograph monitoring is concerned, we are now testing also as a wayside train monitoring system with pantograph monitoring. And then we do this together with Dutch Railways, Nederlandse Spoorwegen, because they benefit greatly from pantograph monitoring for the maintenance of their rolling stock. And we also benefit from pantograph monitoring, but not as much as the railway undertaking like Dutch Railways. So there's also a balance in who is going to pay for it, who is going to maintain them, who will distribute the data. Because when there are systems in track, we say, we are responsible for the track, so we also want to be responsible for the systems. And if the systems monitor trains, then we want to send the data to all railway undertakings and not say, just one is going to get them and the other one not. So that's how we deal with data from systems in our tracks.
Okay, thanks. And there's also a question from Rogier Vos. He's asking, do you think it would be reasonable to set up a system where the overload of trains based on axle weight measurements will check the load and will also be a basis to fine users that are using the track with an overload? Because he says currently can be track damage without knowing who is like the guilty party of that.
Yes, that's I'm product manager of wayside train monitoring systems about 10 years now, and that's something which comes up every few years. Like, should we give a fine to railway undertakings with trains which are too heavy? And what we do is we inform railway undertakings if their trains were too heavy, and we inform them, we've seen an overload, please do something about it, or do something about your loading process. But we do not have set up a system for charging extra to railway undertakings with overloads. And it's a difficult topic.
But it would be legally possible to have something like that because you own the tracks, or?
There should be, then we should also of course we would have to guarantee about have more guarantees about our measuring systems, and that kind of thing. I think it would be legally possible, but it's a tricky topic.
All right. I think there's some more questions. Seppo is asking if it's a well-known fact that data is essential for rolling stock maintenance. And since this data gives also information about the loading of the track, do you see advantages in using rolling stock data, like axle loads, the number of wheel defects also for planning and scheduling maintenance activities of the track?
Yes, that's well, the data of the weight of all the trains. We already have in the Netherlands a system which is called WTMS, and that's an algorithm. And with this algorithm, we combine all the measurements of the weight of the trains with the timetable which has been executed, and well, the configuration of our network, like a track and switches. And then with combining these three sources together, we calculate how many tons have gone over the network and how many tons have gone through our switches. And these data, they are used by our contractors for maintenance, and they are also used for the tenders. When we put an area for maintenance on the market, then well, all the contractors for maintenance know how heavy the tracks they are used, and we also use them for these data for planning the grinding of our tracks. So well, this is well, I consider this data set, it's a beautiful set of data from which I think it can be used even more, because well, the use of our switches and track, well, they are like the fundamentals of why we maintain our tracks. Because when there are no trains running over the tracks, well, then we need not to maintain them, or not getting no trains going through our switches. Well, sometimes you have to put some oil in it, but that's it. But like the use of the track and switches, they can be, I think they can be put to much more use, also in combination with like data of the quality of the track from our measurement trains, and also the data of our switch monitoring, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And then a question from Colin Smith. Are there any examples of data intermediaries used for sharing data, like a third party that manages it? And he says, I've seen examples of this with health information.
This would be really interesting, but I'm not aware of these parties like a kind of data broker or something.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm not aware of that they exist for data in the rail sector.
Richard, would you know anything about this?
Yeah, I think at the moment it is a fledgling business model. I think that, again, in the last couple of questions, there's been quite a lot of ground covered. I think there's a lot of customers out there, there's a lot of countries out there that have an established railway that have this potential. But and I think a lot of the times people talk about the establishment of a data lake or a data pool or some other analogy into which the data from various systems is poured. There is an inherent risk in this, which is we will move forward, more quickly than we're ready to do so. And what I mean by that is that before you pour all the data from different systems into one particular repository, you need to agree how you standardize the different inputs. voestalpine is not a monopolist in any of the systems that we provide. There are, as other audience members have intimated, there are other providers of other types of system. So if you get something from a legal weighing system installed in one of your harbors, and you get the readings from that, and then you try to compare it with a wild system which takes dynamic load impacts, and you get the data from that and you pour it into a data lake, how are you going to compare the two to get a sort of intelligence from that? And the answer to that is that you need standardization. You need an agreement about how that is compared so that you're all working from the same baseline. being a data broker, taking that one step forward and then trying to sell the data to third parties, I think at some point voestalpine is going to be interested in doing that, because we harvest several trains. We harvest the data from several trains every minute of every day. But I think that all needs to be part of a broader conversation before we start talking about the value that we would provide. I think if I can just provide a personal opinion as somebody who's really a train enthusiast as well as a professional, I think really track access charges are going to become the NASDAQ of the European rail industry, because I don't see why a train operating company should pay the same amount to run a train from Arnhem to Rotterdam Harbour when their wheels are perfect, when there is a train operating company that follows straight after that's got a couple of wheel defects on it. Sorry to be contentious, but I think that there's a value there. I think that there's also the value potentially of different routes between, say, Amsterdam and Berlin, talking to railway operating companies and saying, okay, this route hasn't had so much tonnage go over it recently, and we can probably afford to have a train go down it, and here's a discount on the track access charge. So again, that what we're leading towards in terms of presentation of data, standardization, and having a data lake, being able to be a data broker. And again, I'm going to talk about this in Warsaw, is that we are with this data, with the position that we find ourselves in with all of this data in European railways, is that we're at the very beginning taking baby steps in what we can achieve. And I don't think we've necessarily either got our eyes open or had our eyes opened to the opportunities that are out there. And I think that as we go forward, we're going to need to talk about standardization. We're going to need to talk about legality. We're going to talk about trust. And the knotty aspect of all that is data ownership. Who owns this? The question that I get asked a lot is if an infrastructure owner buys some of our systems and puts them into their tracks, and a train goes over that system, who owns the data? And more often than not, the answer is the infrastructure owner, because they paid for the system. Well, the other side of the coin is that it's the train that generated the data. That is a question that gets asked a lot. The rather forward-thinking approach that ProRail have taken is that they're trying to be as democratic as possible, but even then, Juliette has discussed contractual obligations and the legality of doing so, and that I think again is a standard, and I think that a lot of this is going to, get discussed at the EU level before we move too much further forward. So that's sort of how I see the state of play at the moment.
So would you say that contractual and legal obligations aside, so one of the main issues in terms of sharing data in an efficient and productive manner is the fact that there's no standardized way of measuring it? So where do we stand in terms of standardization in Europe, for instance? Which countries are using different units, are measuring different data points? Is there a standard in any way with the neighboring countries in the Netherlands, or?
No.
Not at all. No.
No, we don't have. No, there are no standards. We all have our own systems and our own way of getting the data to our end users, railway undertakings, etc. And then, but of course, we almost all countries have hotbox detection, and a lot of countries have wild impact load detection. And then they all have, they have a different way. They measure in different units like tonnage, kilonewton, etc. But still, there are no regulations in this field. But we, as infrastructure managers, we try to work together, like work together, like finding a best way of doing things. Mm-hmm. So we hope to work together with our colleagues in Austria from ÖBB. Like we said, well, wouldn't it be interesting, like to compare the data of the night jets, which runs from Amsterdam to Vienna, so goes through the Netherlands and a great part of Austria, then what do we measure in the Netherlands and what do we measure in Austria? And then the only goal is gaining knowledge about can we compare our systems when we calculate our values. Is it to be compared, etc. Just only to get to know our systems and gain knowledge about is it possible to exchange data.
Mm-hmm.
So, but no, there are no regulations for standardizations, etc. yet.
No, and this would have to happen perhaps at a European level, for instance.
Well, yeah, I think that's a starting point. But on the other hand, if infrastructure managers work together and they find some best practice and the best way of working, like 3 or 4 countries say, well, this is the way to report about defects to real defects to railway undertakings, and railway undertakings say, well, yes, this way of reporting that we can use this to for the maintenance of a rolling stock. Then I think if there's just only a best way of working, other countries will follow. Because why should you invent something different if there's already something which works?
Mm-hmm. Let's not reinvent the wheel, after all.
Yeah.
And I guess a theoretical question, very theoretically for both of you, timeline-wise, how many years do you think it would potentially take for us to have a more standardized way of measuring rail data at the rhythm that we're going now?
Mm-hmm. No, I think 5 years or something.
Mm-hmm. Richard, do you agree with that?
I think I agree with the 5-year plan in terms of establishing a framework of what would need to be standardized and to implement that inside the European rail industry. Yeah, I think the completion of that would take perhaps just a little bit longer, because I think first of all we need to, as a supplier, we would support the conversation about what aspects of train data would need to be standardized and how is that going to be exchanged. I think the potential is definitely there. I think that the desire is emerging, and I think that the need is there. So I think about 5 years we would be certainly, hopefully, somewhere a lot further forward than we are today.
Lovely. Esther, is there maybe a last question from the audience, or 1 or 2 more that we can take?
There's still some questions. Let's see. Also, the question previously was, I think for Juliette, has ProRail seen a reduction in freight derailments as a consequence of the additional wayside monitoring and data sharing with the railway undertakings?
Yes. And then, at the beginning of this century, we had about every 3 years a derailment caused by hot axles or hot wheels. And then since we installed hot box detection in our network, we don't have them at all. We don't have any more derailments caused by hot axles or hot wheels anymore. So, it really it prevents derailment. And on the other hand, from our wild systems, about 9 years ago, we started informing all our railway undertakings about the quality of their wheels, about their wheel sets. And we started, for example, one of the data we informed them about was if they had a train with 1 or more wheels with more than 350 kilonewton peak force, then we would inform them, because that's an indication something is wrong with the wheel. And like 9 years ago, we had about 800 trains with 1 or more wheels over 350 kilonewton peak force every month. And now we have about 150. So we, by informing and working together with our railway undertakings, we have diminished the bad wheels substantially in the past few years.
Okay, yeah, that's good to hear.
It's also something we are very proud of.
Naturally. It is not a question, but I think just a remark from somebody. As an example of like a rail, we were talking about previously, data intermediary, he mentioned that in the UK the rail industry is adopting the something called the Rail Data Marketplace, which also addresses the legal issues, security and payment, and if whether or not payment is required to access this data. Have you heard maybe of this project? Does it sound interesting?
It sounds interesting. I haven't heard of it, but it sounds interesting. Although in the Netherlands we say, well, we are as ProRail, as the infrastructure manager, we are partly paid by the government. So then, well, we measure a lot of things. So we should give, we should be open in sharing these data. And then also, railway undertakings, they pay their track access charge, and as part for the track access charge, what do you get in exchange? Well, they can run over our network, but they also get the data of the quality of their wheel sets. So I don't think this is something which should happen in the Netherlands, because we want to be really open with our data and transparent, and giving the data to different parties, which can use the data and need the data, and then, well, we are convinced that we all benefit for a more efficient and effectiveness in the railway sector.
Yeah, and also Bernd George was asking where you can apply to get data, and I asked a bit what is the background, and he says, for example, in the Netherlands, Luxembourg and Germany, that for them it would be, the wheel quality data would be relevant if they could get regular updates. So where is there a way to apply for it? Would that be the railway undertaking or the data directly for ProRail? Is there a way to, where would you knock on the door first?
Yeah, well, I say send me an email, and then we can see what we can do with what kind of level you want the data, where do you want to use it for, and then we can also always if you want to see it on the level of the railway undertaking, well, we have to. We have to get the permission, of course, from the railway undertaking. If it's aggregated data, we can always see what we can do. We're always open in sharing data for using it for research, etc.
And so I think this does kind of lead us into our last question for both of our speakers. In an ideal world, what do you hope for in terms of data sharing? You've already given us some hints. So,
well, in the ideal world, I think sometimes wouldn't it be wonderful if we could, of course, share our data of trains running over our network between all kinds of parties without having the fuss of getting permission from like 3 or 4 parties. Then just wouldn't it be wonderful if we could share and share all the data, and of course our data would be used by all kinds of parties, and we would be able to have some standardization, not only within the Netherlands, but also international, so we could exchange data and gain by combining all these data, gain knowledge about, for example, how the wear and tear of the tracks, and getting like the holy grail, what makes the wear and tear of the tracks, and how can we make rail traffic more effective and efficient with all our data.
That does sound nice. And Richard, what about you?
Yeah, I again, sorry to be a little bit contentious maybe in my response, but I think that the situation that we find ourselves in is that, are we sharing data or are we sharing information? And I do hear, going back to the previous question, I do hear a lot about individual nations and railway companies establishing a data lake or a hub somewhere from which they can then farm out the data to subscribers. And I think that that's a very honourable model, and I think that I understand why those companies, those organisations would do such a thing. And in some countries in Europe, it's very well established. But I was speaking to Andy Billington of Rail Baltica many months ago, and he came to me with the question, you know, what's the difference between data and information? And the risk of the establishment of a hub that is ingested all of this data and then spits it out to subscribers is that really all you're going to be sharing is the data, and you're not going to be sharing information. Now, for established train operating companies with millions of euros to spend, I would imagine that those train operating companies that would subscribe to this hub have a tool in waiting that they can use to ingest the data that they get from the subscription into some sort of software that gives them then at the end of the process refined information that they can then pump out to their consumers, you know, their engineers in the depot or such like. Or those train operating companies that are perhaps taking their first steps into a market in a new country are thinly capitalized and don't have a lot of money to spend on that kind of thing, maybe be disappointed that they get really just a load of data that's unrefined, perhaps even a PDF or a spreadsheet, CSV, XML format, and then they're going to need to have some kind of system to process and refine the data so that it makes sense to their employees. And I think really that is, if I can promote what we're doing at voestalpine, is we provide our customers with the tool in Zentrack to refine the data so that it turns into information that can be used by the organization. And you know, that is the target for both us in the new team that we've established and our tools, which is we have to turn the data into information that can be used. And that is, you know, I think we would definitely work in parallel with the hubs that have been established or that perhaps will be established in the future by those countries.
Wonderful, thank you.
And also relating to like getting it more standardized and kind of making more use of the data also across borders. Yolanda is commenting, of course, Europe has the ambition to create better connections between other countries, and she thinks it's very useful if also more data could be shared. Juliette, you said before previously this example of seeing with together with NIJET how the difference in measurements is between Austria and the Netherlands. Is anything like that happening on a bigger scale between countries to kind of set a few steps into getting more of the data shared, or is there anybody working on that, or is that something that should be happening?
Well, that's something that should be happening. So it's only small steps like trying something like one or two trains comparing. A few years ago we compared with our colleagues in Switzerland, one train which from Rotterdam to Switzerland, and then we compare the data, and then to see whether our systems were measuring the same thing, and then we saw it was quite similar, but that was only one test, and no, there's not much done in this field.
And is there also not, because Sepp was also mentioning the ERA, the European Union Railway Agency, is the topic of data and sharing there also a topic, or?
I think, at ERA there are some initiatives, but not very broad yet, I think.
But that
there
could
we're
be
working.
a platform
That
to
could be
establish.
that could be a platform. It could also be really interesting, like a research institute or university, like a really interesting research topic to investigate, to research, analyze data across countries, and then it would only be to gain knowledge, and then perhaps the privacy issue from railway undertakings wouldn't be wouldn't be an issue, I hope.
So on that note, I think that we've reached the end of our time for today. On behalf of RailTech and ProMedia, I'd like to extend our heartfelt thanks to our guests, Mr. Lenthall and Ms. van Driel, for joining us today and sharing their valuable insight. I'd also like to thank everybody watching for tuning in. And if you'd like to learn more about data-driven monitoring and maintenance, join us on November 6th and 7th in Warsaw for our Intelligent Rail Summit 2023. Why data is important for railway infrastructure management, how to analyze data in order to turn it into crucial information, how to establish a proper railway asset lifecycle management. These questions and many more will be addressed during the conference by speakers including Jan Lindqvist, CEO of Railway Metrics and Dynamics Sweden, Sebastian Kaluza, Product Development Director at Novomo, and many more. See our website, intelligentrailsummit.com, for more information and to register, and hopefully we will see you there.